Payroll? What do you mean I have to do payroll? I don't have time for all that. Just tell me the most important things I need to know. Hi entrepreneurs, I'm Vicky Brown, and you're in the right place if you want to engage your team, boost your business, and grow your leadership muscle. You know, so many times, especially if you're running a smaller company, the entrepreneur, founder, or CEO is tasked with taking care of payroll. And while I know there are a lot of online systems that say, oh, just plug in the amount you want to pay the person and you won't have to do anything else, it's not quite that easy. There are still vital bits of information you need to make sure payroll is running smoothly, and you aren't going to get dinged because of some compliance thing you knew nothing about. So, here are 4 of the most important things you need to know when paying someone, specifically in California. First, be sure you're paying the right amount. Now, I know you're probably thinking, what's so hard about that? You decide how much you're going to offer it, and if they accept, then that's what you pay them. But there are things to think about before you formulate the offer. Is the job eligible for overtime or not? Meaning, are they non-exempt or exempt? If you want more info about how that gets decided, check out this episode. Now, the reason you need to figure this out first is because it's going to put some parameters around your salary levels. If the person is non-exempt, then you have to at least pay them the minimum hourly wage, and it may be more complicated to determine the minimum wage than you think. For example, beginning this month, January of 2024, the California minimum wage is now $16 per hour. But if your business is located in the city of Los Angeles, well, then the minimum wage is actually higher than that. It's $16.78. And if you happen to be in an unincorporated city in Los Angeles County, well, then your minimum wage is $16.90. And while the state's minimum wage will hold firm until January of next year, 2025, both LA County and LA City minimum wages increase mid-year in July of 2024. So see, figuring out what the minimum wage is, it's going to take a bit of sleuthing. Oh, and it's not just a minimum for non-exempt employees. Exempt employees could have a minimum amount they have to be paid as well. For instance, in California, exempt employees have to be paid at least twice the weekly minimum wage at the state level. So, since California's minimum wage is $16 per hour, the exempt level minimum wage would be 16 times 2 times 40, which equals $1,280. And whatever the state minimum wage is, when it goes up, the minimum wage for exempt employees goes up as well. Now here's a pro tip. This is a state law, so it only applies to the state's minimum wage, not the minimum wage at the county or city level. Next, when are you going to pay them? Meaning, how often? And no, you can't just wing this. Aside from it being a really important item for the team member, there are laws that dictate when someone has to be paid. For instance, if the person is non-exempt, again meaning eligible for overtime, well then they have to be paid at minimum 2 times each month. Now, you have the option of going with bi-weekly, meaning every other week, or semi-monthly, meaning 2 times a month. And no, actually, they aren't the same thing. You see, a bi-weekly payroll is for the same amount of time each time, 2 weeks, and it happens 26 times a year. While a semi-monthly payroll won't cover the same amount of time each pay period, because there are a different number of days in any given month. Also, semi-monthly payrolls happen 24 times a year. So, you need to get this all sorted before you set up the payroll process. Oh, one more thing. Earlier I mentioned that non-exempt employees have to be paid at least 2 times each month. Well, exempt employees can be paid once a month if you wish, but there are strict guidelines as to what period that monthly paycheck has to cover. And yes, you can have 2 different payroll schedules, one for exempt and one for non-exempt employees. Are you going to give bonuses? If so, be sure you have a solid bonus program written down somewhere. Well, you don't need to give it to your team members. That is, unless it's tied to performance, because after all, anyone would want to know how and if their performance might impact a bonus payment. But if it's just a general bonus, and provided you're not going to give your team written documentation of the calculations, well, then at least have a record you can stand on if you get questions around fairness. Now, I know it might seem like overkill, but it's better to have your ducks all in a row than to be caught flat-footed if or when a question comes up. Now, the other thing to think about with bonuses is the tax implication. The IRS considers a bonus as supplemental wages, so specific tax rules are going to apply. Now, as an employer, you have two options for calculating how much tax to withhold on bonus payments. You can use the percentage method. Generally, that means you're going to withhold at a flat rate of 22% to 37%, depending on how much the bonus is. And by the way, that rate can change from year to year, so always check with the IRS website. Or you can use the aggregate method. Now, with the aggregate method, the bonus amount is simply added to the regular wages and the whole check is taxed as though it's a regular paycheck. Be careful though, because that can easily bump the employee into a much higher tax bracket for that check. The payroll system thinks every check for the year is going to be that high, so it calculates the withholding taxes accordingly. You've actually probably experienced this before yourself. You get a bonus in your check, and you can't believe how little you actually receive because so much is taken out in taxes. Well, that can easily happen with the aggregate method. Now, the other little-known pitfall with bonuses is bonuses for non-exempt employees. You see, as far as the IRS is concerned, a bonus is a wage, and the overtime rate is based on the employee's base wage. So, with a bonus, it actually changes what the base wage is, and therefore changes the amount you should use to calculate overtime. Those of us in HR actually call it the bonus recalculation. If you give a non-discretionary bonus, you have to look at the period the bonus covers and recalculate any overtime that's been paid based on the new base rate, which would include the bonus amount. Now, I could dive deeper into the specific calculations and what is and isn't considered a discretionary bonus, but that would take a good deal of time, and you might as well hear it directly from the horse's mouth, as it were. So, take a look in the description for a link directly to the IRS fact sheet that explains this in detail. And finally, if you're going to pay commissions, there are some rules and regs you need to know. First, commissions are subject to the same tax rules as bonuses. If they're considered supplemental, then they're going to be flat taxed. And if they're processed as aggregate, then they'll be taxed at the regular rate. But the other important thing to know about commissions is that, at least in California, you have to have a written commission agreement outlining things like when the commission is earned, what the rate is, when will it be paid, how and why it might be reduced, what happens if the sale is concluded after the person has left the company, etc. Now, actually, it's a good idea to have all this in writing anyway, even if your state doesn't require it, because it goes a long way toward avoiding confusion and misunderstandings. Now, if you want more information on setting up and running payroll, as well as other info to help you run the people side of your business, just check out the LJE Masterclass. Hi, I hope you're liking the content. I know it's a lot, and if your first thought when you're faced with an HR issue is, a little help here, then you might want to take a look at the LJE Masterclass. The Masterclass is a learning path for entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs who find themselves with HR responsibility in their companies. Listen, if you're anything like me, you spend your time living, eating, and breathing your company. And I know you don't have time for some long, all-encompassing course in human resources. After all, you don't want a PhD in HR. No, you just need the answer to your question, and you need it now. Well, that's what the LJE Masterclass is for. Designed by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, it's an online learning path, and most importantly, resource. Sure, we have bite-sized video lessons on each subject, but you can also just go right to the step-by-step at the end of each section. And in fact, we also give you workflows, any and everything possible to let you get in, get the answer, and get out as quickly as possible. Just select the Entrepreneur Learning Path at leadersjourneyexperience.com. And don't worry, you got this, and we've got you.